Welcome to the Writer's Room. I'm Rona Laycock, and today I'm joined by Chloe Shaquet and Bill Watts.
Hi, I'm Chloe. Thanks for having me. We're living in some troubling times at the moment, so I thought I'd start with a poem I performed in the final of the Cheltenham Literature Festival All-Stars Poetry Slam in October, and it's called Citizenship. A little while ago, on a Thursday, our Prime Minister, Theresa May, whom we didn't actually elect, by the way, had this to say: "If you believe you're a citizen of the world, then you're a citizen of nowhere." But she didn't just leave it there, adding, "You don't understand what the very word citizenship means." I have to say, it made me want to scream. Now, I personally dislike politics and usually make an effort to steer clear of it. It's a personal opinion, don't shoot me for it. And it's mainly because I think it's all rubbish. Most politicians seem only to be in it for themselves, for the glory, for the power, and for the money. But this made me grab a pen and write, because this is precisely the kind of tripe I feel compelled to fight the only way that I know how, by talking in rhyme right here, right now. So Mrs. May believes that to be a citizen, we all have to belong to a single nation. She thinks that for our world to have some order, we must all identify with a single border. But borders are man-made. Borders change with crusades and grenades, so why the hell should we be defined by an administrative and imaginary line, rejecting and fearful of all that lies behind? And how does that work for people like me, the ones who have multiple nationalities, all real, all legal, completely official, with a multicultural upbringing which allows us a sense of belonging wherever we go? Tell me, Mrs. May, I'd love to know. And before you ask, no, I do not value one citizenship over the other. Would you dare ask me which I favour of either my father or my mother? Actually, forget passports, whether single or multiple. You really must be incredibly simple and gullible to think everyone defines their identity solely and exclusively around their nationality. Millions of people view themselves as a part of humanity, as well as, or even instead of, a single country. They value a global citizenship above any made legal by a simple paper slip. Yet with your arrogance, you insult their intelligence, question their competence, undermine their values, but they are the people who choose to take into consideration people from other nations. They are the smart ones that understand it takes unity to tackle issues of climate change, illiteracy, poverty. They know that epidemics don't stop at a virtual boundary. They get that war, hate, hunger, and intolerance need a global approach to really make a difference. You are looking down upon the people who promote hope, love, and compassion, whilst you stand on this narrow-minded steeple of insularity and blinkered vision. So, Theresa May, screw you with your sectarian point of view of what world citizenship is worth when it takes all humanity to save the earth. Your words are divisive and venomous, and I think they're downright dangerous. So I'm going to continue as a citizen of the world, whether you like it or not, girl. And if that means I'm a citizen of nowhere, well, you know what, I really don't care. Especially if it means that you won't be there. So this next piece is another topical one I wrote a couple of weeks ago. It's called High Heels, Makeup and a Doctor's Note. There was a piece on workplace discrimination the other day on the BBC News about ladies forced to wear high-heeled shoes, mascara, lipstick and foundation. An expert, a female in fact, said makeup is an issue for some women if they happen to have sensitive skin and that high heels could be bad for their back. I thought, great, another step forward I see, which is a good, positive sign, especially in these highly uncertain times. But then the expert's implications began to dawn on me. That females need a medical excuse to refuse to wear high-heel shoes rather than just being entitled to the right to choose. But why should women need medical justification? If it's something that a man isn't expected to do, the simple fact that she just doesn't want to should be a perfectly good enough reason. Otherwise, it remains discrimination. So we've recently had Valentine's Day, so I thought it would be appropriate to read a love poem. This one is a love poem about the sky and a skylight. Skylight. I own a piece of sky. It's mine, so I have framed it. A plain wooden frame is all it needs, as its beauty speaks for itself. I put some glass inside the frame to protect my piece of sky, to preserve it from dust, fingerprints, and the sticky residue of time. I placed some fabric across the glass so that I can hide my strip of sky. I often do this at night to preserve its modesty when it drapes itself in nothing but diamonds and pearls. I like to think that my sky appreciates my thoughtfulness as it rests from my enamoured eyes. In the morning, when I pull the fabric aside, I see my sky as though for the very first time, an unveiling, a grand opening. And in return for my good care, my consideration, my patch of sky rewards me with a new picture every single day. Sometimes so bright it throws a square of light onto the floor that travels around the room, so warm and golden that a cat, god amongst creatures, would worship it. Other times it is a moving display of clouds in an array of colours beyond infinite and never twice repeated. It has been known to turn purple, white, orange. It has been known to flash, and now and then it drums a beat on the glass of the frame. And on such nights, as I lie beneath my piece of sky, hidden behind its obscured frame, listening to its tune, I can almost feel its fingertips tapping on my skin. I'd like to end with a very short poem called I'll Stick with Chocolate. I've never been a size 6, so I don't know if I'd like it. But I have eaten chocolate, and I do know that I like it. I'm not much of a risk taker, and I don't like gambling, so I'll stick with chocolate because I'm pretty sure I love chocolate more than being a size I've never been. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Chloe. I was really struck by the political poetry because it's quite hard to do. You caught that rhythm and that rhyme which drove it on. Was that a conscious effort? I know you said it was at the slam, so you do need that for a slam, don't you, that rhythm and rhyme. But did you think that was particularly suited to the subject? It just happens, to be honest. In my slam poems, I get an idea and I write what comes through as fast as I can before I lose it, and then I rework it afterwards. And then after that, I prefer, wherever possible, to perform my slam poems from memory. And as I learn them off by heart, I find the rhythm and then I adapt it, because some things might read fine but then don't sound good spoken out loud, especially with the rhythm, and then that's how I sort of perfect it in the end. I admire people who can do things by memory because I find it really hard. Yeah. How do you do it? It's not easy, and actually I did blank at a slam just before Christmas, which knocked my confidence, so therefore I, as quickly as I could, went and entered another one just to make sure I could get myself back out there. But I'm fortunate that I can memorise things quite well, and it is just by repetition. I often do it lying in bed to try and get me to sleep, and it works. And then when there's sticky bits, it's either because there's something wrong with a line, or I have to find a pattern or a story or whatever that can link it to the line before. So just a general idea of what a poetry slam is for those people who've never been. A poetry slam is basically competitive poetry, which in itself, the whole concept is a little bit flawed because you can't judge art versus art, but as humans by nature we do like to rate things, and it's just very entertaining for the audience, and it's a great way to make poetry accessible to a wider range of people who might not read it on the page but be happy to go out to a local theatre or pub or whatever and hear some poetry. So a poetry slam is essentially a competition for poets. Each poet will come up and perform a piece. Usually there's a 3-minute time limit. And then they are scored. There's different ways of scoring, either with the audience holding up coloured cards for their favourite poet, or there are scores, and often they will knock the top and bottom scores off to get a more fair score. It's a bit like ice skating, I suppose. And then sometimes there are several rounds, so the highest scoring poets will go to subsequent rounds until eventually a winner is declared. Do you find it takes time to create the poem? I mean, you know, when you heard that thing about discrimination, having to wear heels, all that nonsense that goes on, are you able to do that really quickly, or do you have to mull it over? That one was quick because I wanted to get it out as fast as I could. I made a little video actually of it. A lot of my poetry, I think, of delivery to an audience rather than reading on a page, and I had an image in my head straight away, so I was really keen to get it out while it was still fresh and topical, because there's no point if you're doing a piece on something you've heard on the news the day before, having it out a year later. So I worked really hard to get that one out quickly, and I did a little video of me lying on the floor surrounded by high heel shoes.
Oh no, I think that's brilliant. That is a good point, because there are lots of things we want to comment on, but the moment passes us by. Do you have a notebook with you all the time, or do you have a old-fashioned dictaphone or whatever they're called now, that you can record things when you're not in an easy place to write?
I have taken to carrying a notebook around. I didn't used to, but the one thing I always have with me is my phone, and it's got the notepad section on it, which I use enormously. And when I'm driving, I do use the voice recording thing, because ironically you always get loads of ideas when you're driving, but you can't write them down, but it's very easy to just I have it open and then just tap the thing so I can record something.
Yes, I think that is such a good point. I remember writing a sonnet in my head driving home from Swansea, and I don't know where it came from, and I got home and I got in through the front door, and I said to my husband, don't speak to me, I got to write this down. And then after that he actually bought me one of those little voice activated. In those days, it was before the phones were quite as sophisticated as they are. But I think it's something about the brain being active in another field that allows the poetry to work its way subconsciously somehow.
Yeah, or in the middle of the night, unconveniently, so you have to sort of half wake yourself up and write it down, otherwise it is gone.
So you read at the Slam, Poetry All-Star Slam at the Cheltenham Literature Festival. Yeah. How was that, and how did you get involved?
It was amazing. I've done a few slams. I've not been writing poetry very long. I used to do it when I was a teenager and fell out of it because, with studies and all that, I didn't have much time. But then I realised I was wasting a lot of ideas, so I got back into it in late 2015, and then joined a couple of poetry groups, and it sort of went from there, and I started doing some slams, and I got invited to do the Cheltenham Literature Festival All-Stars Poetry Slam, and that one was pretty incredible because of the size of the venue. It was in the Parabola Arts Centre. It was sold out. It was, I think, over 200 people there, which is incredibly daunting, but I think it felt so surreal that although I was nervous, it was just sometimes it was kind of less scary than performing in smaller, more intimate venues, because it was just too big to comprehend, really.
So do you have to send work in, or how do you take part in something like that?
A lot of them you just enter. You ask to enter. There's a lot of events advertised on Facebook, or just search for poetry slams, and there's some where you sign on the door, so it's first come first served. There's others where you email, and then sometimes you get invited if you know people who are organising one and that you've done one with them before.
And you mentioned poetry groups. What do you get out of being in a group?
Feedback, support, and the opportunity to test material. Like I said, I often find it more nerve-wracking performing in these smaller groups, so it's good practice to then, if I'm going to take it to a slam, to see how people respond and how I cope with delivering it as well. So
how do the groups work? Is this do you have to take things apart? Do they comment?
No, these are more open mics. The one I do in Cheltenham always starts with a workshop and then an open mic, and then people we can talk about it afterwards. And there's another one that I go to in Gloucester, and that is purely open mic. You don't even need to sign up. You just who goes next, and off people go, and it's very supportive, and then people have a chat about it. They come up to you later and we talk about how we felt about each other's work, and it's very, very supportive and helpful. So you'd recommend those places as somewhere to meet like-minded? Yes, I've met loads of wonderful people, made loads of new friends, found out about new events, and overall I just find writers and poets a really friendly, warm, supportive and non-judgmental community, because obviously any sort of writing is incredibly personal, so you can't really judge other people on what they do, because it's just so personal. And it's extremely difficult when you're putting your baby out there to be judged by other people. Yes, that's one thing that makes me very nervous. Is I've had a bit of experience of acting, and when you're acting, you're essentially being somebody else and you're performing somebody else's work, whereas anything you've written yourself, you're being judged both on your performance and the content as well. So you're totally vulnerable. Yeah, very much so, yeah. Yeah. Oh no, it's very brave of you getting up on stage. I
quite gobsmacked, really, at doing something by memory. And
yeah, I think I'm a little bit crazy.
No, I think
I
it's
like
brilliant.
the interaction with the audience. You get a lot back.
You talked about making a little video about what you've done. If people want to know more about you or see this, is it possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on social media, so on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. It's at Chloe J Poetry.
So is that at the
the at symbol?
Yeah.
But if you search in Facebook, it's just Chloe J Poetry. It's Chloe is CHLOE.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Chloe.
Thank you for having me.
It was great to learn more about a different aspect of poetry, really. The slam is quite different, exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Bill Watts. I write under the name of William Watts, but I go under the umbrella of the Tewkesbury Tale Teller. I write all sorts of short stories and many others, including histories, and I've also written some poetry. This one is called A Mischance. At the end of this, you might find similarities with things that have happened in your life. You might have the question, is this really fiction or is it true? I'll leave that up to you. A mischance. The first email said, "Can we talk?" Not only did I not know the person named, but also had to look at the email address 3 times. I hadn't a clue which country it was sent from. The ending was different from anything I'd ever seen before. Apart from that, "Can we talk?" sounded pretty dodgy to me. Me being a nosy sod, thought I'd give it a go and see what response I got. My reply said, "Certainly we can, as long as you're not asking for money or trying to help me claim PPI." I thought this a good reply, although upon reflection I wondered if the recipient would understand PPI. Probably not, as I had still not identified where the original email had come from. Anyway, I was not really expecting a response. Surprise, surprise. 2 days later, I received another email. I started to read and became so involved in the story that I continued to the end. In a nutshell, it said, the writer was a woman from Afghanistan. She had lost her parents, husband and children in the fighting. This bit almost had me in tears. She then joined the army and spent her time studying for promotion in between fighting. When promoted, she worked her ticket to become involved with military finances. She explained that over the years working in finance, she had siphoned off over 20 million in Afghan currency and wanted me to help her get it out of the country so that she could start a new life in another world. And of course, there would be a cut for me. The email finished with, "Please don't get in touch with the authorities and ruin my future. If you don't want to help me, just delete the email." I sat and pondered for days. Her loss of family was really playing on my emotions. Should I report her or become rich? 5 days later, I decided that it had to be the authorities for her. Although I still questioned whether I was doing the right thing. After all, it would be nice to be rich. I opened my email account with the intention of forwarding the email to the authorities, only to find that I could not. Neither could I become rich. Both emails had been deleted. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Now, I know you're a great storyteller, and I have read many of your stories in your book. I've got your book. Tell us a little bit about your writing life.
Well, it all started with short stories. I belonged to a writing group, and after a while I was collecting short stories. I must have had about 100. And I thought, well, what's the point? I'm doing nothing with them. So I thought I'll put them in a book. And I did it all by myself. I printed them out on a normal basic printer, and then I sold them. I sold them at craft fairs, and things got a little bit bigger because of the number of books I was writing, and I was going away from short stories, writing bullet point histories. I even wrote one on how to write, publish and sell your own books, and I was putting them on eBay and various other selling media.
So would you advise other people to do this sort of thing? I mean, it's very difficult to get published.
I mean, anybody can do it themselves if they take time out, because it is time consuming. And I mean, I'm now at the stage where originally I was doing it, printing them out on my printer upstairs. Now I have to use a Tewkesbury printer purely and simply because of the number of books that I'm selling and the number to actually print. And like I say, it's time consuming, it takes a long time. And also, you've got to be prepared to go out and sell them yourself, because they won't sell unless you're putting in the effort.
And so how do you do that? Well, if somebody was thinking about doing exactly what you're doing, what would you advise them to do to sell their books?
Well, first of all, you need to decide where you're going to sell them. A medium I use now is to actually go out to the public. I read my stories at Women's Institute. I go out regularly to a care home, and it's sort of developed from there. And I'm now in the situation where I retired. How many years ago? Oh, good grief, it seems like forever. I retired 5 years ago, and I haven't got any time. I'm on the go all the time, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. And if anybody is going to have a go at it, then you need, first of all, to enjoy it, because there's not much point in doing things you don't want, especially you're not really into, especially when you retire. You need to get the most out of life you possibly can.
So when you write your stories, because you're a very prolific story writer, aren't you? You write a lot of stories. Number
10 in the short stories will be coming out in June.
That's remarkable. Where on earth do you get your ideas from? I mean, I loved your email, because I think we can all say we've had something similar to the email that you wrote about. But how do you know that you've got an idea for a short story?
Well, I'm a member of Montpellier Writing Group, and a lot of inspiration comes from there. I also do what I'd advise everybody to do. Write about what you know, write about what you see, write about things you've heard.
Is that being open to every possibility around you?
You don't have to use their words or their names or anything about them. You just change the names and add a little bit to make it more exciting. A lot of my stories, people say, come under the bracket of soaps because they're about real life. And I've got my own genre, which not using soap, it's called itch tea. It means it could happen to you. Probably won't, but it could do. And if you really get into reading my short stories, you'll find that you can relate to a lot of them because, like it says, it could happen to you, but it probably won't.
But I think that's the secret of good writing, is to be able to touch somebody else, that they would read something and it touches something in their mind that they think, oh yes, I understand this, or this is really interesting. So writing about every day, you're in with a chance then, aren't you, that people will share that experience or part of the experience.
That's true. I mean, there's a lot of people, I get a lot of feedback because I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all the other media. I get a lot of feedback, and luckily enough, I can't recall any really bad ones. I get advice on how to improve things, but then that's good. Any sort of feedback is good. Whether you take it on board, that's entirely up to you.
Well, that's a good point. I think perhaps belonging to a group helps us to understand how other people see our work.
Yeah, and it's a very good way of advertising as well, because I've just written a bullet point history of Cheltenham Town Football Club, and it's absolutely flying. It was a bit of a shock because I expected it to sell well, and it is.
So if people want to know more about William Watts, the Tewkesbury Tale-Teller, how do they find out about you?
Just go on the internet, www.tewkesburytaleteller.co.uk.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for bringing your story in, Bill, and for telling us more about your writing. If you'd like to join us in the writer's room and come and talk about your work or read some of your work, then contact me on Rona Corinium, that's all one word, ronacorinium@yahoo.co.uk. Thank you.